The super strong Vugar Gashimov Memorial Tournament is taking place as I record, and so it seems wholly appropriate to choose a game from this event for the BCM Game of the Month. The only question is, which one? Hello everyone, this is Andrew Martin here, and welcome to the Game of the Month for May 2015. You can't really go wrong when you choose a game from Magnus Carlsen, and so I've chosen his round 5 game against Maxime Vachier-Le Grave. There are many fantastic games taking place in this event, but this game struck me particularly for its originality. This is not a theoretical encounter, this is a full-blooded game of chess between two incredibly strong players. And as such, it's worthy of your attention. Well, in keeping with the modern trend of not revealing your plans in the opening to the enemy, Carlsen just plays very quietly to start off with. Knight f3 and g3, a flank opening, keeping tension in the game. And to his credit, Vachier-Le Grave doesn't duck the original theme. He strikes out with b5. Bishop came to g2, bishop b7. Of course, when this move was played first of all, I think it was in the Petrosian-Spassky World Championship match right back in the 1960s. You know, it was regarded as heresy for black to strike out with b5. But since then, the idea's been explored, and black's move b5 is fully playable. It just leads to a very interesting and, well, I would say, original position. And Carlsen continues the originality here by playing knight to a3. Well, of course, white can play other moves. He can simply castle, he can go d3, he can play c3, he's played a4. There is an enormous choice. Knight a3 gets a piece out, attacks the pawn. Does white really want the knight on that square? Well, Carlsen's just trying to set his opponent some problems in the opening. Go ahead, make your choice. And Vachier-Le Grave protects his pawn with a6, and now white plays c4. I mean, that is a normal move here. You can't leave the knight on a3 for very long. Not only does c4 attack the pawn again, it gives the knight a square to retreat to. So Carlsen drops back to c2. Black plays e6. I mean, already black's got plenty of choice. He can go, for instance, c5. That was seen in a game between Efimenko and Moisenko in Dubai 2014. And I'm sure there are other moves too, for instance like a5. But e6 is perfectly reasonable, and white now took the centre with d4. So what do we have here? Well, it's almost a completely original opening. We've got this knight on c2, very unusual indeed. And black has a very strange pawn formation on the queen side there with his pawns on b4 and a6. I mean, probably it looks like black's going to have to play a5 in the very near future, in which case that a6 move looks like a bit of a waste of time. But on the other hand, in this type of position, black is looking to control e4. He's got nice control over that square. So until white can demonstrate that he can break black's control over e4, I think we can just say this position's unclear. So Vachier-Le Grave played a5. Well, again, there was plenty of choice. You know, black is not stuck for choice here. He can go c5. That's another way to protect the pawn. He can even play d5, angling for a more conventional type of position. The main advantage of that is that it attacks the pawn on c4. I mean, probably white's going to go knight e5 and battle is joined. But if he does try to isolate the pawn on b4 by going c5, and then hitting the pawn with a3, we get a very weird and unusual position with black pushing his pawns on the queen side, shutting the queen side down. White comes in with his knight, and now black plays knight fd7. And it's not at all clear to me that white can maintain any sort of advantage in this position, because the knight on e3 is getting in the way. So all in all, it seems to me that both players have got what they wanted in the opening. You know, something strikingly original. And now, game on. So Carlsen castles, black plays bishop e7. And now I think a very good move by white, d5. If you can play this type of move, and it is very common in Queen's Indian-like positions, then do it. Because it's shutting down that bishop on b7 and taking away black's control of e4. I think that's the main point of the move. We note that e takes d5 is pretty uncomfortable for black after knight h4. That's the main idea. The knight is headed for a beautiful square on f5, and black's pawn on d5 is pinned. If black tries to keep the knight out by going g6, then c takes d5. Sets a very nasty trap, as if black castles in this position, he immediately loses to d6. That's a trick worth remembering, as it can crop up in many different positions. Note we have two bishops attack now for black, and if black takes on g2, white takes on e7, winning. So going round to this variation one more time, of course g6 is not very good. Black's probably got to play d6 here, and after bishop h6, there's no doubt about it, white is pressing, and he can press on both sides of the board, because if black plays knight bd7, white can play a3. This sort of position you really want to avoid against Magnus Carlsen, because white is dictating the game, and you know he's just not going to let you off when he gets an initiative like this. So Vachier-Lagrave brings his knight out to a6, and if there was a drawback to that move, d5, it must be that the square c5 is now available for black's knight, and that's exactly what black does. He occupies that square, which of course has the benefit of protecting the bishop on b7, making black less vulnerable to any cheapos. Rook to e1. Well, again, there's nothing new under the sun. This position was seen in a game from Wroclaw in 2014 between Naiksans 2559 and Kuroats 2563. And there, white played a peculiar move. He played d takes e6. I don't really understand that. It may be the white's a little bit better here, but it leads to a completely different type of position than rook e1 does, as white logically is going to take the centre, and he's pushing black into a passive situation. All the same, despite the fact that black's passive, I think if he's patient, he's got some chances to defend here. So e5 was played attacking the knight. It may seem risky to invite that knight into f5, but black's intention is to get rid of it by playing first d6 and subsequently bishop c8, followed by taking the knight on f5. So Carlsen plays bishop g5. Now, if there is one thing that Vachier-Lagrave does in this game, is that you'll see on several occasions he tries to go active in a position which really doesn't justify that sort of approach. I think in this position, black has got to be very careful. He's got to be very patient, and he's got to be aware that he's slightly worse. He can defend this out if he's patient, but if he goes berserk, the position is going to react against him because white's got space and better development. So with that in mind, I think the best move here for black is just to go bishop c8. And after that, white has got several good moves, but which is best? For instance, he can simply take on e7. And then there's a choice between f3, just keeping the bind, or maybe queen to f3, angling for some sort of better endgame after h6 and a lot of exchanges, knight to e3. But is this position better for white? Optically it looks fantastic, but you know, black's got the better bishop suddenly, and after a4 it's not so easy for white to prise open the queen side. I'm not so sure that white's that much better here. So going back, probably after bishop c8, white may be better off just to go knight c e3 and threaten to open up the position using his pawns. For instance, if black goes a4, white can play f4. That's one pawn lever. And just going back, if black plays rook e8, which kind of dissuades white from playing f4, then I think a3 is not a bad move. So there are all sorts of opportunities for white after bishop c8. It's still a game which is a bit better for white, but knight takes d5, as played by Vachier-Lagrave, to me that invites severe danger. You're opening up the game in a position where you're lacking in space. And Carlsen's on the case right away with the excellent move bishop h6. And of course this is going to give very many practical opportunities. As for instance, if black tries to defend it out with bishop f6, then we can take on d5. He has to take on h6 now, check, and in comes the white queen. We see a position similar to this in the game, but I think this is better for white than the game would be. So that's why Vasily takes straight away. In comes the check, black must block, and now c takes d5. And you can see, this is not going to be very pleasant for black to defend. All the same, he may be able to defend it. So unsurprisingly, MVL parks his king in the corner. I mean, you want to get out of the pin, don't you? He could have tried h5, sacrificing the pawn to buy some time for bishop c8. But I think there, white keeps the advantage with h4. If black takes it on f5, we take back. He goes back with bishop f6, and now knight to e3. Not a very pleasant position for black at all. As, well, white's got the natural plan of preparing in advance of the queenside pawns. That knight on e5 is ruling the roost. The problem for black here is that he doesn't have much counterplay. So, seeking counterplay, he parks his king in the corner. He retreats his bishop to f6. White goes knight c e3. And black now plays bishop to c8. Well, knight takes h6 must have been on Carlsen's mind. And it looks good. My best guess is he didn't do it because of bishop g7 and knight f5, queen f6. Black has regrouped to an extent, and his idea is to play bishop a6 as marked in the diagram. And after that, once again, black is manufacturing counterplay. So Carlsen wants to keep his grip. That's why he plays knight c e3, bishop c8, and now queen to f3. As much tension as possible in the position, and leaving black's king looking pretty vulnerable. Of course, knight takes h6 is possible at any stage. So bishop g7 was played. White played bishop h3. And now a nice manoeuvre by Carlsen, just slowly getting his bishop to a better square. Very nice. The defender, with less space, should exchange pieces. So bishop takes f5 is logical. And now this is the second stage in the game where really Vasily almost digs his own grave by trying to get active. Well, I mean, how can you go active with black in this position? I mean, there's no coordination there. The knight on c5 is very nice. I mean, black's got good things about his position, but he can't bring them together. What should black do? Well, again, I think black has to tough it out here. I mean, it's not very pleasant against Carlsen to play bishop f8 and then rook b8 and then rook b6, something like this. Just try and patiently hold the position. Of course, it is entirely passive, and that's why perhaps somebody as strong as Maxime Vachier-Lagrave doesn't want to go for this. But the onus is on Carlsen to break through. And there are other moves too, going back to the diagram. Black could also play rook a b8, or he could even think about a4. That's slightly more risky, because black's queenside's a bit loose, but it makes it difficult for white to leave open the queenside. As played, c6, I don't like it. It just makes it much more easy for Magnus Carlsen to manoeuvre his pieces into good squares. And of course, that's exactly what Carlsen does. He's on the weakness like a flash. The queen comes into d5, rook a d1. Black is getting pinned down. So you can see how this pseudo activity by black hasn't really helped him at all. It's just made his position worse. Now he's got an extra liability to defend. Not only he's got a weak king, he's got weak pawns all over the place. And his bishop on g7 is awful. So bishop f8, that's the fate of this bishop. Queen takes f7. Carlsen isn't frightened to exchange queens, as he still maintains the advantage with dominating pieces. Knight a4 was answered by rook e2 defending the pawn, and rook c1 by an exchange, and then king to g2. It looks as though black might be able to somehow attack white's queenside pawns. But just take a look at that black king. The problem for black is that king. If he goes on some sort of spree attacking the queenside pawns, then white rooks penetrate to the back rank and the black king could easily be mated. So that's why black's got to temper his enthusiasm and bring the knight back to c5. And white just played the safe b3. The rook came to c3 and now king to h3. A move with a typical Carlsen stamp as far as I'm concerned. Just gradually squeezing, improving his position, making it more and more difficult for black to find good moves, intensifying the pressure, and then when the pressure's at its height, you know, the opponent cracks and makes a mistake. Well, I think maybe black's already made 2 strategical errors in this game, going for a tactical struggle when really the position didn't justify it. So there's a little period of a lull here, and now white gets on with the job of improving his position. We note that Carlsen is working with tricks. If black takes on e4 now, knight to d5, and there are two black pieces under attack. So in the game itself, black played rook to c5, white played knight to c4, black played king to g7, and now f3, just strengthening the position, saying to black, what can you do? Knight e8 was answered by rook d2. Knight c7, bishop came back to g4, and now a4. And this is the third instant in this game where black rejects the opportunity to try to defend passively and elects to push forward. Of course, this makes the pawn on b4 that much more vulnerable. What else could he do? Well, he could try and defend passively by going knight e8. We've seen this once again, just manoeuvring the knight to hit the bishop. But there I think white can make progress by putting the bishop on f5. Okay, black just retreats passively, and now f4. I'm pretty sure this was what Carlsen would have played, and as you can see, it intensifies the pressure. One of the great things about Carlsen and why he's so successful is that he seems to be able to put pressure on his opponent from virtually any position. Just give him even a micro advantage and he gradually and consistently improves his position, leaving the opponent stuck for moves, and that's exactly what's happening here. Well, going back to the game, Vasyl Agrarov plays a4. Okay, Carlsen hoovers the pawn off. It looks as though this might be slightly risky due to a3, because black maybe can come in and take this pawn on a2. But now a very good move once again. Bishop to d7. The point of this is that after rook c2, Carlsen's going to redirect the bishop to a better square. And bishop c6 was another excellent move. Well, having come to c2, black feels he may as well take the pawn. That's what he did. If he plays knight a6, then bishop d5 leaves black really at a loss for a move. For instance, if knight to c7, knight to c5, rook to c6, that completely ties black up. And if knight to c7 here, then bishop to c4. And we can see what the manoeuvre of the bishop has done. The knight on c7 is completely stuck for moves. So going back to the game, okay, black plays his last chance, rook takes a2. There's a check, black loses a piece, but he hopes by pinning the bishop that the a pawn will provide counterplay. No such luck, because Carlsen is completely in charge of the tactics. He plays rook takes h7. If black takes on c6, there's a skewer, and if he plays a2, then rook a7 just cleans up. Sure, black can take on c6, but here we just reach a completely winning rook and pawn ending with the check, and then rook b6. Nice easy win for white this, as black can't do very much. He's already in a kind of zugzwang. So in the game, black played king g6. White went rook c7 again, and once again this a2 move doesn't work. It's the same ending as before. So after rook c7, black hasn't really got any moves. He tried king f6, white went h5, again squeezing unmercifully. Rook c1 was answered by rook h7, a2, and now a very nice finish, bishop d5. That's a beautiful move, a very nice conclusion and fitting conclusion to this excellent game, because Carlsen's even allowing black to queen. But of course, if he does queen, we get this lovely mate, rook f7, king g5, rook f5. The domination of white's pieces persists until the end. Now, of course, that was no everyday game. Carlsen's making chess look easy there, as he completely outmaneuvers Vasily Graf, one of the strongest players in the world. Well, I can assure you that is not at all easy to do. But that's why great players are great players. You know, they have this gift to make chess look easy. So there we are, a predominantly strategical struggle, where I feel that actually Vasily Graf, by going active for several moments when he could have just tried to hold the line, probably sealed his own fate. But you know, when you're playing Carlsen, the pressure's so great, you know, who's to say how you will play. So thank you for viewing. That's the BCM game of the month for May 2015. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next month.